3rd Battalion of the 12th SS Gebirgsjäger Regiment arrived in Mo i Rana, Norway, ending a 1,600-kilometer foot march, most north of the Arctic Circle, that started on the 8th of September, withdrawing from Soviet lines. After the delousing station and a short rest, we boarded trains for Germany. Elements of the headquarters of SS Gebirge Regiment 12 arrived in Kolding, Denmark, and moved to Fals, west of Münsterreifel, to prepare for participation in Unternehmen Herbstnebel, Army Group B's attack on Antwerp, designed to split the American and British armies. Most of the 3rd Battalion board ships in Moss, Norway, for an overnight convoy to Aarhus, Denmark. The officers are briefed, and Nord is assigned to Army Group B's Ardennes offensive. The 3rd Battalion in train for Kolding, Denmark. The next 2 days, all clothing was replaced, and all MG-42s in the infantry were replaced with our aged MG-34s. The 11th Company commander, the headquarter company, mortar platoon, and some of the signal platoon were taken to form a new heavy company. We boarded 2 trains, minus the 14th Company, which was still in Norway. The 6th SS was then reassigned to General von Opsfelder of the 1st Army. After a 750-kilometer train ride, the 3rd Battalion disembarked and foot marched 30 kilometers to our assembly area. Around midnight, a written order was delivered to the 3rd Battalion command post.
The shortage of infantry replacements caused the 7th Infantry Division's infantry regiments to be ordered to Europe in October before mobilization, maneuver, and combined training was conducted. The regiments landed at Marseille, France, on 10 to 15 December. We were formed in the Task Force Heron to be used on a limited scale in the 7th Army rear areas where training would be completed. The division staff, support trains, artillery regiments, etc. are planned to arrive in mid-January. As the major German offensive unfolded in the Ardennes, Lieutenant General Patton wielded 3rd Army's 3rd Corps northward, relieved Bastogne, and started pushing the Germans back. On 18 December, Lieutenant General Alexander Patch's 7th Army was ordered to stretch its front from 47 miles to a staggering 84 miles to cover the shift of 3rd Army. This necessitated thinning troop densities in our lines we know will not escape German intelligence. A strong point in the line at the fortress town of Vichy has been completely withdrawn. Major General Brooks shuffled his 6th Corps forces to cover the area with available troops. The last 10 miles of the Corps' left flank from Vichy to Neuhofen was covered by Task Force Huddleston. Task Force Huddleston deployed a screen and strong points on the east-west mountain roads with engineers in reserve. The heavily forested, hilly terrain was difficult to move through, making it an unfavorable avenue of attack. Major General Brooks accepted this weak spot as an attack could be delayed long enough for reinforcements to be rushed in. 7th Army Headquarters G2 intelligence alerted us to expect an attack around or to the west of Vichy by approximately 5 to 8 German divisions. Lieutenant General Patch met with the 15th and 6th Corps commanders early in the day and ordered all holiday celebrations canceled. The shortage of troops canceled our training and forced assigning the task force to a frontline defensive position. The Schaeff levy of about 600 troops will be made up with ill-trained replacements.
The 3rd Battalion assembled in Ludwigswinkel. We were issued a new weapon, the Panzerfaust. In the Arctic North, the few tanks were handled by anti-tank units. On the Western Front, tanks were so numerous they would overwhelm our infantry. The 3rd Battalion started marching west through fresh snow and arrived at Ergenshardt at dusk. The Kampf Group is now attached to the 361st Volksgrenadier Division. An army messenger met the column at Motorhouse to turn off the road and led the battalion CO and adjutant to the 361st Advanced Command Post at Fernlindell.
On 27 December, the 70th Division's 3 infantry regiments were subordinated to Major General Robert Frederick's 45th Thunderbirds Infantry Division as reinforcements to cover their overstretched front. My regiments will take over Task Force Huddleston's sector tomorrow. In spite of the warning of an imminent German attack, there has been no reported enemy activity.
The 361st Major Ehlers explained the plan. Army Group G is to exploit the thinning of the Allied lines south of Army Group B's Ardennes offensive. In Operation Nordwind, Army Group G is to split the Americans and the Free French forces to alleviate pressure on Army Group B. 4 Volksgrenadier divisions with the 6th SS support will break through American lines and establish control over key roads through the low Vaz Mountains passes and allow the reserve 21st and 25th Panzer Grenadier divisions to exploit the terrain of the Alsatian plain. The 19th Army in the Colmar pocket in the south will join us at that point. The 361st Volksgrenadier took Barenthal, opening the road to Reipertsweiler. The 257th kept pace and advanced to Motorhouse. That was the end of our encouraging prospects. The 256th failed to take Dambach, and the 559th Volksgrenadier Division failed to take Lemberg.
Task Force Huddleston's screen was hit in force. In spite of Germans infiltrating the line, their first attack was beaten back, and the engineer reserves were committed. Faced with superior German numbers, Task Force Huddleston started withdrawing in accordance with 7th Army orders to yield ground rather than endanger forces. Large numbers of vehicles had to be abandoned as the troops fell back to prearranged strong points to block the roads the Germans needed. Major General Brooks released 6th Corps Reserve, 19th Armored Infantry Battalion, to reinforce Task Force Huddleston, but proved insufficient to stop the Germans. By the end of New Year's Day, Task Force Huddleston had withdrawn 6 miles, leaving the 100th Division 15th Corps right flank wide open. On the left flank, the 100th Division was hit in force near Limburg, but held. The 45th Infantry Division on the right is defending Dambach against strong attacks.
Our mission is to seize Melch by surprise on the 2nd January, and then Wingen sur to block the Motor Valley against a likely American attack. We were told to expect the CP of a large unit, perhaps a division, in Wingen. SS Panzer Grenadier Battalion 506 and a battalion of Grenadier Regiment 951 would seize Wimmenau.
My 276th Infantry Regiment deployed to the vicinity of Rosteg with the regimental command post in Zittersheim.
The 3rd Battalion awoke and ate while an orders group was held. We marched off in silence with no smoking and stopping in the woods above Melch. Standartenführer Schreiber with 2 others arrived during the scouting report of the town. While 3rd Battalion established a security screen, rested, and ate Danish ham, Standartenführer Schreiber briefed the commanders. 12th would join us in the afternoon, forming Kampfgruppe Wingen, under command of Hauptsturmführer Burgstaller, commanding officer of the 1st Company. We had to move fast while the American chaos lasted. The weather affected we Arctic veterans very little, while several Volksgrenadier leaders noted a decrease in the men's physical abilities. The icy mountain roads, unusable for even tracked vehicles in some places, delayed and slowed our attack. The 2nd day, Lemberg, Gotzenbruck, and Reipertsweiler failed to be taken to open 2 of the 3 routes for the Panzer Reserve. Capturing Wingen and Wimmenau is necessary to open the 3rd route.
General Frederick and his 45th Infantry Division command post at Langholmschatzbach ordered 179th Infantry Regiment trucked from Wissenberg toward Wingen sur the night of 1-2 January. The 179th arrived and set up the regimental command post in Wingen sur where the 117th Cavalry of Task Force Huddleston CP fell back to from the initial German assault. The 179th held the important crossroads as a counterattack jump-off point, more importantly to deny the Germans its use for a breakout.
After Standartenführer Schreiber left, the 3rd Battalion leaders gathered around the only map for a terrain analysis and wargamed the situation. The 1st Battalion had not arrived, so we marched off. 3rd Battalion reached the Rothbach Valley and stopped there and sent a patrol east to find the army while the troops rested. The patrol returned with Untersturmführer Hans Karlaut, Obersturmführer Hans Jacobs, and a messenger of the 1st Battalion reported enemy in Wilgenguth. During the patrol's return, the MG-42 gunner was ordered to fire on movement in the dark. The MG-42 jammed, but saving what turned out to be the 1st Battalion party. 2 messengers were sent on to Kampf Group command post in Milk with a report. Kampf Group Wingen then marched off. Scouts made contact with the enemy near Weinborg. The 13th Company was to attack the enemy right flank. 12th Company would then mount a frontal assault. 11th Company would secure the right and support the attack with machine gun fire. Other elements stood fast behind. 3rd Company of the 6th SS Gebirgs artillery first fire was unable to contact his guns. We started the attack. An American called out an understandable German suggesting a 10-minute ceasefire to remove the wounded. SS Hauptsturmführer Bruno Schütz, commanding officer of the 13th Company, cautiously agreed, suspecting a trick. This was inconceivable with the Russians. The men watched in stunned silence as medics holding flashlights rushed out into no man's land from both sides, treated and evacuated the wounded. It was like fighting a war in a different era. The fighting resumed and went on all night. One platoon leader fired whistle rounds from his horizontal, unnerving startled Americans.
Reinforcements arrived at the beleaguered Limburg and Reipertsweiler, and most importantly, the 275th Infantry Regiment took over from Task Force Huddleston to close that gap.
The Army withdrew from contact. The Kampf Group advanced westerly then to Kaysburg and found a hedgehog and dug in. Occasional small arms fire in the road from the south and intermittent anti-tank fire from the west hit. Then mortars and artillery zeroed in. Our Berger radios were not able to make contact with Milk or our artillery. 12th Company commanding officer Obersturmführer Schindler was killed by a mortar hit in his foxhole. He had rejoined the company on the 25th of December, even though recovering from a wound received on the 29th October at the Battle of Munio in Finland. Hauptsturmführer Schuler assumed command. Reipertsweiler was attacked by the 2nd Battalion, Grenadier Regiment 953 from the west, and the 1st Battalion with Stug support from the north along an icy road. At the edge of the town, the lead Stug slid 90 degrees sideways, which was a self-propelled gun, and blocked the road. Accompanied by 2 messengers, I arrived at the Kaysburg with the 361st Volksgrenadier Division orders. They were to take Hühnerschere Road from Kaysburg to Wingen, Heidenecke, Wingen zur, and block the Heidenecke-Hochburg-Wingen Road and establish a bridgehead over the Moder River. We would be reinforced by a Stug battalion when successful to continue the advance towards Severn to open the route to the Alsatian Plain for the 21st Panzer Division and the 25th Panzer Grenadier Division.
1st Battalion, 314th, reported an attack on Reipertsweiler was repulsed. The 314th counterattacked and took 2 ridges south of town against moderate resistance. Later in the day, the 313th, supported by tanks, counterattacked northward. This was the direction the Germans came. It inflicted heavy losses on the formerly attacking German battalion. Reipertsweiler has remained connected to friendly forces in Picardy, but Abel and Baker Company of the 315th Infantry Regiment in Wingengrowth remain cut off and assuredly surrounded.
The commanders concluded a frontal assault along the Hühnerschere Road without artillery support was impossible. Untersturmführer Wolf Zeff's proposal to bypass the enemy from the Kaysburg and return to Weinberg, follow mountain trails southeast and then southwest, and cross the Heidenfels Mountain north of Wingen was accepted after discussion. I was asked to take the proposal back to Milk for approval. This was necessary because the 361st Volksgrenadier issued specific orders instead of Gummibefehl, flexible orders. In preparation for the operation, Bergstaffel took all wounded and POWs back to our rear services and returned with supplies. Each man was issued half a loaf of bread, a few tubes of cheese, and all the ammunition, hand and rifle grenades that could be carried. I returned with the approval of the plan. 1 platoon at a time, Kampf Group Wingen withdrew from the Kaysburg Heights, and I returned to the command post in Milch.
The 276th Infantry Regiment, CP, in Zittersheim received word to expect an attack that day. Word was passed to the 1st Battalion of Reserve at Wingen to be on the alert. The battalion deployed its companies in a perimeter around the town with the CP in Wingen. In total silence, the 725-man column stopped and started
constantly. Squad leaders moved back and forth at halts to keep the column together as the exhausted troops often fell asleep sitting, crouching, or leaning against a tree, sometimes even standing. Crossing a road, the column froze on hearing a vehicle. A U.S. Jeep stopped and two riders dismounted to look at the dark spot in the road created by our boots and then drove on. The 4th Company encountered small groups of enemy north of Wingen. The immense firepower of German MG-42s, MP-40s, and Finnish MPs overwhelmed the U.S. troops, laying on the ground in small, brief, sporadic exchanges of fire. The Kampf group reached the south end of the forest overlooking the town of Wingen sur. The commanders' conference was finishing when mortars started landing, so the attack jumped off immediately instead of the planned 0700 time.
The 179th Infantry Regiment reported hearing small arms fire on the right flank. Troops in Wingen reported all quiet at 0500. Company B, 276, screening in northeast of the town, reported being hit by an enemy patrol at 0450. Elements of the 180th Infantry Regiment arrived and set out from the road between Wingen and Wimmenau, proceeding north to close the gap in the line to reclaim the area Task Force Huddleston had vacated 48 hours previous. This mission took priority. The raid unfolding in the Wingen area should be cleared by Task Force Heron, already surrounding the town.
Both battalions rushed down the mountain slopes into the town of Wingen. Not a shot was fired from inside the town, and only scattered rifle fire from the surrounding hills. Clearing building after building, many American soldiers were taken prisoner, mostly support staff, literally roused from their beds at gunpoint. No resistance was met in the center of town, and only light resistance were alerted by fire. Seizing their command post might buy us a few hours before combat troops in the hills coordinate a counterattack. We took the opportunity to establish our own command post, set the defense of the town, and consolidate prisoners in a central location. We incorporated the American aid station's medics, doctors, and most importantly, a vast quantity of medical supplies with our own regimental aid post. We cannot make contact with Kampfgruppe Schreiber or the 361st Volksgrenadier Division. We have the objective. Roughly 306 American prisoners and a number of vehicles.
Early reports from Wingen indicate 40 to 50 Germans bypassed our perimeter defense, snuck in and hold the town. Major General Frederick ordered me to use the 276th Infantry Regiment with Company B, 781st Tank Battalion to regain the town. This force should be more than adequate. Lieutenant Colonel Wallace R. Bob Infantry Regiment arrived at Preuberg with the mission to clear the woods north of Wingen at the same time. Late morning, M4 tanks arrived and shelled any visible Germans in the town. 3rd Battalion of 276 commenced their attack, supported by the 1st Battalion of 276. Both battalions were under strength and missing key leaders, suffered when the Germans took Wingen. Company B had nearly been obliterated on the heights northwest of town last night. In retrospect, this information should have alerted us that there were more than 40 to 50 Germans in Wingen. Not knowing where the likely American POWs were in the town, or which buildings held Germans and U.S., tanks were ordered to use machine gun fire only. Baker and Love Company barely penetrated into the town when they were pinned down by machine gun fire from several directions. And the 2 lead tanks were destroyed by point-blank range rocket fire. The destroyed tanks blocked the 2nd attack supporting tanks, and the infantry could make it no further, but held the position through the night. The tanks, however, withdrew all the way back to Zittersheim for the night. 2nd Battalion of 274th failed to clear the woods of Germans and withdrew 4 kilometers back to Prunenburg.
Back in Melk, we were waiting to hear the 506 and the 951st have taken Wimmenau. With Wimmenau and Wingen sur in our hands, the Panzer Reserve can break out.
Intelligence says 2 German armored divisions lay within an hour's drive of this southeast-facing dip or bulge in the 7th Army line. 180th Infantry Regiment, establishing a cohesive main line of resistance north of Wingen, is the primary concern. 179th will maintain its defensive arc around Wingen, even though it allowed penetration into its rear. The enemy in Wingen will be met with my own green troops behind the reestablished main line of resistance. Our strong points in Limburg, Wimmenau, Reipertsweiler, and Niederborn are holding out, but are alarmingly unconnected. Wimmenau and Reipertsweiler are prone to becoming surrounded and possibly eliminated.
The 506th and 951st attack failed to take Wimmenau. This leaves Kampfgruppe Wingen in danger of becoming surrounded.
I ordered the 276th Infantry Regiments and elements of the 274th Infantry Regiment in Prunberg to clear Wingen in a coordinated attack from all sides. Able Company of the 276th approached the town from the south, and as soon as they reached the railroad underpass, were hit by close-range machine gun and small arms fire from seemingly every direction and pinned down. Being unable to defend their tank support from Panzerfaust fire at this choke point, they seemed stuck. George Company, the 274th, came at Wingen from the southwest, advancing through the woods, fighting through fierce opposition all morning. They were not able to approach the town until around 12:30 hours. Charlie Company, the 276th, marched from the east, skirted north around Wingen to approach the town, coming across the former Baker Company position and hundreds of GI's remains frozen on the battlefield from 28 hours before. The company's first attack was halted on a hill north of town, hit by the Germans. They regrouped and conducted a full frontal assault that was cut down by fierce machine gun and small arms fire as they ran up the ridge. Item Company of the 274th led the assault from the west, passing through and linking up with the pinned down forces and diminished Company L 274th, who would join the advance supported by Company B 781st Tank Battalion. The Joint Tank Infantry Force made slow progress despite the 274th Infantry Regiment commander, Colonel Morgan's presence at the 3rd Battalion command post. Another M4 was instantly lost to a Panzerfaust as soon as it cleared the underpass. The attacking companies withdrew. Following the morning's failures, I ordered Colonel Morgan to clear Wingen and high ground north of the town by 1500 hours with artillery and tank support. 2nd Battalion of the 274th was called in to strengthen the attack. Pressure from the 45th Infantry Division and 6th Corps to clear Wingen was mounting. My deadline of 1500 hours to clear the town had come and gone without significant process. In house-to-house and tree-to-tree fighting, it was impossible to tell friend from foe. Throwing more men and tanks into the fray caused multiple instances of reinforcements coming up on friendly units being mistakenly engaged as Germans. With the confusion that reigned in Wingen, ordering further assaults this night would be disadvantageous, and the tanks were not equipped will not engage at night, plus need to be refueled and rearmed in Zittersheim. I arrived at the 276th Infantry Regiment command post and placed Lieutenant Colonel Cheeves in charge of the final clearing of the town to commence at 0800 the next day. I promised Major General Brooks' 6th Corps Wingen would be cleared by 1100 hours, 6th January.
No combat patrol has been able to reach Wingen to report on the situation. It seems the American line north of Wingen has been reestablished, and we fear Kampfgruppe Wingen may be lost if they are in fact in Wingen. Our 506 on the Reipertsweiler, 1 kilometer north of Wimmenau, was hit hard and slowly forced north, suffering tremendous losses during the day. With that withdrawal, Wimmenau and Reipertsweiler are in enemy hands. If Nord is in Wingen, they have no flanks and no hope of reinforcement. We must withdraw Kampfgruppe Wingen or lose them. Oberkommand de Wehrmacht concluded the advance in the Low Vaz Mountains could not continue without commitment of the reserve panzer forces. The tenuous, single-lane, icy, narrow mountain roads of the Vosges Mountains in the 361st Volksgrenadiers' hands is inadequate for a breakout of the Panzer Division. It is decided to shift the assault east. In this new plan, holding Wingen sur is pointless. I was once again personally dispatched by Standartenführer Schreiber with 4 of my best NCOs from Melch to infiltrate enemy lines and deliver withdrawal orders to Kampfgruppe Wingen. Picking our way slowly through the hills, several times coming so close to American positions we could hear them talking, we did make it to the town. Making contact with 1st Battalion, Hauptsturmführer Burgstaller accompanied me to the 3rd Battalion command post where I explained the situation around 0600 hours. Being surrounded, the only possible escape will be a nighttime withdrawal. With dawn approaching, we will have to hold Wingen for another horrible day. The order for the day is to slowly trade real estate for time and cohesion. Ammunition will have to be carefully conserved. Artillery started to fall on our immediate area in the town, and at the first break, Burgstaller and his adjutant ran back to their CP.
The 180th Infantry Regiment reestablished the main line of resistance north of Wimmenau, but it was not yet a continuous line. There were gaps nearly a mile wide. The heavily forested hilly terrain allowed fairly large forces to infiltrate or exfiltrate from the Wingen area. I met Lieutenant Colonel Cheeves, and we proceeded to the forest edge overlooking Wingen from the southwest to view the entire area. Cheeves went forward to direct the assault. It would be oriented east to west, much like the very first counterattack 2 days ago, but echelon in strength far in excess of what was previously committed at once. The artillery prep began as ordered, but the 781st Tank Battalion was conspicuously missing and overdue. Fox Company stepped off. All was quiet past the point of fierce resistance the day before. When Fox reached a blue-painted house, all hell broke loose and the men scattered. The Germans held their fire until half the company was at point-blank range. The fighting was tremendous, taking until 09:30, and multiple bazooka shots that cleared just the first house.
Burgstaller and Untersturmführer Carlisle reappeared in the 3rd Battalion command post, this time bringing what remained of their own staff. A combined command post in the sturdiest cellar in Wingen was a prudent decision from this point forward. Our Gebirgsjägers were taking terrible losses and fighting fiercely, but retained good unit cohesion.
A messenger with a spare radio was sent to reestablish contact with Fox Company. The second lieutenant commanding the company called in. The commander, Captain Davenport, had been hit 3 times and evacuated. His executive officer, Lieutenant Mahan, had been killed when the squad he was leading fell victim to shooters from a second-story window as they took cover from automatic fire in the roadside ditch. I ordered hold fast and allow the following company to pass through to continue the assault. Fox had done all they could. Although green, they showed enthusiasm and daring that no longer existed in veteran units. Their casualty rate was correspondingly high, but their job was done. George Company proceeded forward on the right and Easy Company on the left. Hopefully the afternoon attack, scheduled after another artillery barrage, will proceed faster. We were told only about 50 Germans in the town, but had captured that many already this morning and surely had killed a good number more. It took nearly an hour to relay the firing orders to the 160th Field Artillery Battalion, almost 2 kilometers away, causing the attack to be delayed until 1300 hours. The delinquent tank support finally arrived, hours late. Men refused to move up, citing the losses they had sustained the previous 2 days. They wanted assurances friendly infantry was indeed where we claimed they were. They finally moved up unbelievably slow and only then supported the advance of the rapidly bloodied George and Easy companies. To make matters worse, George and Easy companies were subjected to murderous crossfire. The worst fire came from the heights above the town. Charlie Company had been dispatched to the heights to counter this threat in the morning. Were making very slow progress. 4 to 5 men in each foxhole with automatic weapons, in addition to well-concealed fortifications in the dark woods, raining accurate fire on the town, with a nightmare mission to attack this town. Finally, George and Easy Company seemed to make good progress, and as dust settled in, seemed as if there were only a few houses left to be cleared. The M4 tanks were clamoring to refuel and rearm. Reluctantly, I gave permission, and they drove quickly away for the first time that day. Out of the town, back to Zittersheim. One of the tankers' parting shots was a shout, "We don't fight at night," which drew understandable vicious curses from the poor souls in George Company, left to spend a bitter night alone mere yards from hundreds of SS mountain infantry, who were proving themselves to be the cream of the remaining German army. I left the observation area, secure in the thought that the job was all but done and that after resting for the night, we'd be finished promptly tomorrow. Just before dusk, the Germans counterattacked on the left flank of our advance. They pushed us back some small distance.
Mercifully, night fell in Wingen. Once again, the Americans ceased offensive actions. Had they persisted in the momentum they had gained over the past few hours, there's no telling what fate would have been. To gain time, we counterattacked using forces that had disengaged from the overlooking hill. The Army no doubt feared being overstretched and surrounded. It was time to put our withdrawal plan that we developed over the course of the day into effect. Knowing a long, deadly, silent march awaited us, we determined a vast majority of our wounded would not be able to make the trip. Trusting the Americans would abide by the Geneva Convention, their best chance of survival and proper treatment was being left with the American wounded under our care and turned back over to the Americans. Likewise, we could not take with us hundreds of POWs now locked unguarded in the Catholic Church. All will be left to be discovered in the morning after we are gone. Instead, we will take 8 American officers with us. Since I had just less than 24 hours ago personally infiltrated into Wingen through the surrounding American lines, I was elected to lead our breakout to friendly positions.
Northeast of Wingen, the 180th Infantry Regiment, pushing to close the gap and move the main line of resistance north, ran directly into more Germans holding the ridge. The defense was more than the 180th men could overcome alone, and the advance halted.
Fortunately, it began to snow. This reduced visibility as well as muffled all sound and light in and around the mountain town. Quietly, our elements broke contact with the Americans and followed us up the black hillside. Of Kampfgruppe Wingen's original 725 men, I was leading now only 256 beleaguered and spent men. The newly arrived SS Reconnaissance Battalion Nord moved up to reinforce us and halted the Americans northwest of town, holding open the door for our escape. After short skirmishes with 2 American units, the Kampfgruppe scattered into small groups and rejoined our line and passed to the rear for the first hot meal in 6 days.
The combat-weary men of George Company in Wingen awoke happy to find the hard-fought-for town abandoned by the Germans. Hundreds of prisoners of war and wounded from both sides had been left with the American medical officer who had been coordinating the treatment of German and American wounded. North of Wimmenau, around Reipertsweiler and Limburg, a main line of resistance had been reestablished for the most part and the front stabilized. Aggressive action had to have been taken to replace commanders who proved unable to lead troops effectively in combat. Senior and junior officers, NCOs, and soldiers instinctively provided leadership to carry out missions. A German colonel observed, "They were extraordinarily flexible. They adapted immediately to a changed situation with great doggedness. They were able to evaluate their experience and through unconventional conduct, transfer it into results." This concludes our presentation.